Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Howie Heckman, one of the developers here at PTS. Thanks for joining us today for our Getting Started with ClearStream RFID and Designing Your Own Virtual Site Survey webinar. Today will be kind of a basic overview of our virtual sites simulator tool that allows you to set up and configure an RFID system and see how the software works and how RFID might solve some of your issues within your own environment. So with that, the agenda for the webinar is just to go over a little bit about who PTS is and what ClearStream RFID is, to just kind of, for anybody that's just new to the software, kind of go over some of the highlights. Then talk a little bit about what the virtual site survey is. Then I'm going to give a live demonstration of how you can put together and use the tool. And then, as always, we'll have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar today. So if, as I go along, if you have any questions, please send them over to your question panel. And at the end of the webinar, I'd be happy to answer those for you. Also, before we get started, if you could, we'd encourage everyone to follow us on social media. That's where we'll post all of these webinars that kind of teach you about our software, about our products, and also where all the latest news and everything goes up for our software. So check us out on our social media pages, and you'll get all the latest information there. So a little bit about an introduction to portable technology solutions. So portable technology solutions, or PTS, we've been in business since around 2000, creating software for enterprise class data collection. We have a couple different products that we develop. Today we'll be talking about ClearStream RFID, and specifically the virtual site survey tool. And that application is meant for RFID data collection, but we also have another product called Tracer Plus, if you're unfamiliar with it, and that is a mobile application development tool. Allows you to put together mobile apps for Android, iOS, and Windows PCs and deploy them to users out in the field, and then connect those mobile applications you've created back up to a backend database or system of your choosing. So it kind of allows you to build mobile technology onto a platform that you might already have in your business. And that application supports barcode, RFID, BLE, and NFC scanning solutions. And then on ClearStream, obviously, the RFID side. All of our software is free to try. So if you go to our websites, you can download and trial everything. You can follow along with the webinar today as well and set everything up as I have, and then you can kind of test out the software that way. A little bit about what ClearStream RFID is. Again, for people that are completely new to the product. So ClearStream RFID is really a middleware application that sits in between fixed RFID readers and a backend database or system. There's no programming involved in the tool, and I'll show you that today in the live demonstration, but it allows you to easily configure and manage networked RFID devices and map them to a pre-existing system. It supports a wide range of different types of devices, from UHF, LF, and HF on the RFID side, so card scanners or EPC Gen 2 UHF scanners, as well as BLE gateways. The BLE gateways allows you to scan for things like an iBeacon or an Eddystone beacon, which are battery-powered devices, and collect that data and sync it into a pre-existing system. Just as a note, on the BLE side, we did a webinar last week with doing zone locationing, which I encourage everybody to take a look at, but it shows you how you can use ClearStream RFID to install gateways in different rooms and track the beacons as they go in and out of the rooms. But with ClearStream RFID, it allows you to track any type of tagged item, again, UHF, LF, BLE beacons, track the movement of those items as they go in and out of certain locations. So RFID, you can set up portals where you can track tagged items as they go in and out of a stock room or something like that. And I think I'll set something like that up in the webinar today using the virtual site survey. But really, you can set the application up for a lot of things. Here, there's just some notes as order fulfillments and things like that. Really, it's a horizontal application for data collection. Allows you to set up fixed RFID readers really to track anything. Station tracking, how long an item is at a station. Tracking movement in and out of a stock room, things like that. You can kind of configure it as you need to, and gives you flexibility in that type of setup. And also, again, it's free to try, free to download, so you can get up and running relatively quickly. Even if you don't have equipment like today, I'll show you this virtual site survey tool. You can see how the application works. If you do have equipment, you can test that as well, and you can even set it up in just the same way that I'm going to talk about today in the virtual site survey tool, see how it works in a live environment. So what is the virtual site survey? Well, the virtual site survey, it's really just an add-on to ClearStream. It allows you to kind of see how the application works. So you can build a simulation of your own floor plan There's no programming involved. I'll show you how you set it up today in the live demo. So you can create a clone of your floor plan. Then you can kind of, as you can see here, place readers throughout the environment, as well as the tagged items in this floor plan here. And then you can see this data being collected by these fake readers in the environment and how they get sent to your database. So you can hook up these emulated readers to a database and see the tag data moving in and out of it. You can animate the items within the environment, so you can see, you know, as this box is moving through this portal here, you can see and have it flow through there, so you can capture that and see how it scans those tags. And then also you can tie this into your own database. So even if you don't have the actual RFID equipment, you have a database maybe that you're already intending to use, or some type of backend system that you want to use with this RFID data collection. The simulator, this virtual site survey tool, allows you to see that tag data flow into that system. So just in the same way you'd set up the actual equipment, the virtual site survey will allow you to do that and see that data flowing into your database. So that's a little bit about the virtual site survey. Let me just see this question here. Just as a note, again, anybody that might have joined, we're going to have a question and answer period at the end. So if you have any questions, please send them over there and I'll answer at the end of the webinar. So some problem solving with the virtual site survey. Again, you can simulate your own environment with fixed RFID at no cost. You can download and use this in a free trial. There's no programming experience needed for this. So everything I show you today, you can set up on your own very quickly. You don't need to bring a third-party integrator on site. You can see how this data, again, maps into your system. And again, it's all drag and drop, point and click. So there's no programming involved in it. Directly connect it to your database. And also eliminates hours of installation and integration just to see how it might work. So it'll give you a quick demonstration of RFID. Now, it's not perfect. Again, you will always want to do RFID testing with actual equipment to see how it will work with the tagged items that you have and things like that. But this will give you kind of an overview of how you might want to lay out your floor plan, how you might want to install the equipment, and then see if your configurations work, and then getting into your database. So with that, let's jump out of the PowerPoint here and go into ClearStream and kind of set up a live demonstration of this. And again, at the end, if you have any questions, please send them on over. So here I have ClearStream, and I have nothing configured at the moment. So this is the application as you might see it when you first install the application. Now, actually, I would like to mention that you can go to our website at clearstreamrfid.com to download and install this application. So I'll just bring that up here. If you go to clearstreamrfid.com, click on the free download button up here, and you can download and install ClearStream. And when it's done installing, you'll see this setup here. Basically, an unconfigured ClearStream that we're going to start building out now for this virtual site survey. So to start, I'm going to actually build out our environment. So you can kind of imagine maybe as I'm doing this that if you were doing this with real equipment, you'd already have the equipment out in the facilities maybe installed where you think you want to use them. And then you're going to come back to this portion here that you see on my screen now and actually configure your RFID readers and map them to a backend database. So I'm going to go ahead and create the environment, add my readers, and then I'm going to configure those readers to collect the data and stream it into a database. So to get to the virtual site survey tool, you can click on the tools menu up on the top and go to virtual site survey. And it brings up this window here where we can build out our floor plan. So I'm going to expand it and start creating some stuff. So I thought for today, I just create a simple little demonstration. I'm going to do a main floor plan area, and then maybe over here I have a stock room. So it's simple to create. You hit the plus floor space button here, and there's just click and drag where you want to add the floor space in your environment. If you need to remove something, you hit the X with the floor space here, and then just go over the areas you want to delete. If you want to expand anything, again, you might want to take another foot here. You can go ahead and do that, and maybe I'll go one more direction this way, as well as make my stock room a little bit bigger. So now let's put in, I'm going to put in a couple of tagged items next. So I want to actually put the products in here that I want to track. So maybe this is your floor plan. You already have stuff packed away in this area here. You want to set those against the wall. Maybe they're on shelving or something like that. You can also change what types of products here you're tracking within ClearStream RFID or with this site survey tool. So you can see on the right-hand side, when you click on these, you have some properties for each one of the items in your environment. One is the type. So you can change what you're attempting to track here. You could do like a pallet, you can do the box, you can do IT assets, so a PC, things like that. Some of the things you'll notice, like if I put a tool here, if I make a hammer, one thing that this simulator tries to do is this hammer will be of type metal, so you can see it switched to material metal, but the tag type on it is still a label. So one thing this tries to simulate, and just to take a step back, RFID can be very affected by the types of equipment that you're scanning. So if you want to track a metal object in your environment, let's just say it's a tool like this, a hammer, or a PC that has a metal case. The types of RFID tags that you place on it are very important. If you just put a paper label with the RFID tag right on that metal, you will, in almost most cases, get a very poor read range, because that tag will be detuned sitting right up against that metal surface. So they have what are known as on-metal tags that you would want to get for that type of installation. So if I were to leave this as a metal object with a tag type of a label, if I actually in the site survey tool move these past my antennas wherever I put them in this environment, it'll actually probably misscan this, so it won't do it. So this virtual site survey, again, it's not perfect. It's just really to illustrate some of the issues you might run into in setting up fixed RFID. But it kind of causes you to have to address those so that you can put the correct label on the correct type of item. So I'm just going to leave these now as maybe the boxes and the pallets. But just as a note, if you switch it to a metal object with a label tag type, you will actually miss reads within the virtual site floor plan here. So you want to change the tag type. You'd want to go to something like an on metal or a label foam backed, which is another form of an on metal tag. And those tags typically give a little bit of spacing between the metal object and then the antenna that's in the tag. And you want to make sure you take that into account as you're designing your environment. And again, it's not perfect, but it just tries to illustrate some of the issues that you might see in your own environment if you were to actually start tagging items and not take into account the materials and the tag types that you're affixing to them. I'm just going to leave these as the box, and I have a palette here. So the first thing I thought I'd set up is I have a stock room here. I can put a label maybe, just labeling this as stock room A or something. And I want to track these items as they go in and out of here. So to start, we need to add an RFID reader. So I'll put that right at the doorway. And I want to track direction. I want to know that when this item goes out versus when this item comes in. So what I'll do is I'll add 2 antennas. I'm going to do one on the inside. I'm going to wire up a second one maybe on the outside here. And I want to try to cover my space here so that I can get a good coverage of this area with the 2 antennas. Now I'll try to move them a little bit closer, try to get a good read range there now. So what I'm setting up here is actually a common attempt in RFID to track direction. And basically what happens is as this box transits through these 2 read zones of these antennas here, we're getting hits from the tag on both antennas. And by it going through this one first, followed by this one, we can set up within the software the ability to detect that as a check out event. Versus if it comes through this antenna first, followed by this antenna first, it'll record it as a check-in event. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up here so you can see that data flowing into your database. So I have everything kind of right now to set that up. I have my RFID reader, I have 2 antennas, and I have my 3 products here. So again, imagine this being your actual physical equipment that you have installed out on your in your warehouse or facility someplace. And now you want to go ahead and configure it within ClearStream to stream the tag data to your database. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to that first. Actually, let me put a label here as well. Let's call this the workspace. I don't know if this is where we're building something. So we'll put that out here. So we have the stock room, and then this is maybe where we're doing some work with these products as they're being checked in and out of this stock room. So now I need to go configure again. I have this stuff all hooked up. My guys wired it correctly to the walls. I have the reader installed and it's on my network. They hooked up an Ethernet connection to that reader. And now I need to map this reader to my database. So I'm going to jump this over to the side and come back to ClearStream RFID here. So I'm back in this typical setup for ClearStream. And really the way this works is you have a source of tag or beacon data on the left-hand side, and you have a destination of where you'd like to send all of that information every time the tag is reported or read by the reader. So let's say we have our database already configured. I know I want to go to this database on my system. So I'm going to go to ODBC here, Open Database Connectivity. There's a whole bunch of other options. You can go to SQL Server. ODBC supports things like Microsoft Access, Oracle, MySQL, things like that. You can go to SQL Server directly. You can go to Excel workbooks or even text files, as well as custom endpoints. Custom endpoints allows you to send your tag data to like a web service or something like that. So if you have a system that is expecting like a HTTP post of your data, you can configure that here. For today's demo, I'm going to just select ODBC, and I'm going to use the sample database that comes with ClearStream, which is a Microsoft Access database that's pre-installed or installed with ClearStream. And it's labeled ClearStream RFID sample. So I'll go ahead and select that. Finally, I know the table that I want to put all of my tag information in as it's tracked throughout my facility. So I'm going to select that here. It's the RFID tag list table. This is where my tag information is going to go when my emulated readers scan the tags and send them to the destination. So now I need to hook up my reader to that table. So I'm going to come over here. I don't have anything configured just yet, but I'm going to click the devices button and now add the devices that I have in my environment. So I only have one, so I'm going to click the add button up here and I'm going to select emulated. If you have actual equipment, you would just select the type of device you'd like to use. So if you had a Zebra reader and you wanted to hook that up, you can go ahead and select Zebra, Impinj, any one of these types of devices that you have, you'd select that type for the actual equipment that you'd like to use. If you're using the emulator, the virtual site survey, you select emulated from this list. And that adds one reader to our environment, and it calls it ClearStream Device 1. I'm going to call this Stockroom A reader. Okay, and it's now in my environment. And the only thing I want to do, just to start really quickly, I'm going to add 2 antennas to this, and then I'm going to close this. So all I did here was added the 1 emulated reader, added the 2 antennas at full power, and I'm going to close this just to show you this scanning tag data. Now, if you could see, I have my Stockroom A readers now the source. The destination is this Microsoft Access database table. And down below, I have the field mappings. The fields on the left here are the fields of information collected by the reader, and the fields on the right are the fields in this database table. I can also jump over to the data viewer to look at what's in that table. Now, I left some stuff here from before, so I'm going to clear this out. I want to delete all of the tag information. So the table that I selected, this ClearStream RFID sample database RFID tag list, now has no tags in it. So with my configuration, let's see what happens if I start this up. I'm going to go to Start Stop. I'm going to hit Start on my reader. The simulated reader is going to go to a running state of true, inventory state true. There it goes. I'll bring my floor plan back over. And you can see now, you can tell it's on. The little green lights go on the reader. The read zone goes green. And if I take one of these packages and move them in the field of view of the antenna, you can see it just recorded a tag, or it sent a tag to the destination. So if I take another one here and move it over, you can see it sent 2. So that's a default setup. It's not going to track direction. But if I go to my database, I can see by hitting refresh here, it just scanned both packages. It scanned them on antenna 1, and it sent that database record into the table that I've selected here. You can see it was read by the reader, Stockroom A reader, and it's a new tag visible event. So it's a default state. The only thing I configured was the reader and the 2 antennas. And then I just pointed that reader to a database table. And now every time a package or pallet or whatever it is that you're tracking comes into view of these antennas, they report their tag event to the database. So I'm scanning those tags and sending them to the destination. So now let's go ahead and actually, since this doesn't currently record direction, let's set up a direction application here. So I'm going to delete these records again, just so we're at no records in our database. I had sent 3 tags to the database. I'll just reset that back down to the 0. And I want to stop my reader so I can make some changes to it. But again, when it stops, you can see the lights go off on this thing, similar to what you might see on the actual equipment. So let's configure a portal check-in, check-out scenario. So I want to know when these products that are sitting in my stockroom A go out onto the workspace area, and then when they go back in. So I'm going to jump back to configure. I'm going to click on my devices tab again, or button, so I can configure more about this reader here. So this will open the devices dialog. So now the first thing I need to do is name my antennas. So the way I do this is I'm going to name the antenna 1, which I put on the inside of the stockroom. I'm going to name it in. Antenna 2, which is on the outside, I'm going to name it out. So to configure direction, I'm going to actually turn off the report tag visible event, report visible. So by default, ClearStream, when a tag is scanned by the equipment, it sends that tag event to your database. So it scanned a tag, so it puts it into the database. But I only want to do that now if it happens to go past both antennas. So there's actually some kind of motion involved in this environment. So I'll go ahead and remove just the scanned event. I'm going to create a custom event in this setup. And it's actually going to be 2 custom events. It's going to be one for the check-in and one for the checkout. And then I have to define what the tag sequence is that would trigger that event. So let's go ahead. I'm going to add the 2. Let's do a checkout first, and then a check-in. For the checkout, all I need to do is add 2 things that happen. First is the antenna equals in, followed by the antenna equals out. And these values are what I named the antennas. So the check-in is going to be the opposite of that. It's going to have the 2 tag events for the antenna. Now for the check-in, it's going to be check out and in. They're just basically the opposite. One happens to be if an antenna is read on out, then read on in, it's a check-in. It's going into the stockroom. And the check-out is the opposite. It's if the antenna that reads the tag is in, followed by out, it's a check-out event. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and go back to our environment. And let me start this up. So I'll start my readers. That's going to turn the readers on in the virtual environment. So just like the equipment, if you do that, when they turn on, these go back to green. And now I can take this equipment here. I made this a little too big, I think. So now what you'll notice is if I take one of these boxes and put it in front of just the one antenna, nothing actually is recorded to the database now. Because I turned off the fact that I don't want to record these tags if they happen to just be read by one antenna. I want that motion. I want from the inside to the outside is the checkout versus the opposite direction check-in. And I also want to try to cover that if, when you're on the inside of the stockroom, you might get a read here in the actual environment. So you might have this antenna that's inside the stockroom hitting this tag, but I don't want to record that in my database. I just want the fact that it went and left the stockroom. So let's go ahead and take this through. And if I go through here, you can see once I went through the second read zone in the background, it went to a tag sent to destination 1. So if I go back over to the database and refresh this, here's the tag. Here's the tag event. It was a checkout. So I can see this item with this RFID label was checked out at 3:28 at 11:27 a.m. If I then go back to my environment and go back in the reverse and refresh my database, now I get that same tag was a check in this case, at 11:28 on 328. So I got the two events there for check-in, check-out of those two products. So I can track the movement as it's going throughout that facility. So just to maybe show you some more things you can do with this, I am going to set up a little animation here, and you can watch these products. Let me move these off. So I can set up an animation area. I'll put it right here and right here. Put it right through the middle of the read zone. Up on the top, I have animation controls. I don't want cradle to grave. Cradle to grave will actually take the product and it can create it here in the start and destroy it at the second. The cycle will cause these things to go back and forth. So if I go to a cycle, and I'll just up the speed a little bit, and I will actually even put a duration to wait here. Let's do 2 seconds, and duration to wait here, 2 seconds. And now I'll start, oops, didn't want that. Delete this one. So I'll start this animation, and these products are going to go back and forth between these two. So I'll just hit that start here. Then they're going to wait at each side because I have it waiting for 2 seconds. So they're waiting at each read zone, and they're going through. And as they go through, if I jump back over to here, you can see these counts going up with each item that passes through that portal. And so I can watch them being tracked as they go through. And then if I look at the data, you can see these items are going in and out of this portal, and it's automatically being tracked in our database. So as they move, I'm getting new entries in the database for each one of those products with the direction, whether they're checked in or checked out. So just illustrate a little bit as to how maybe those products might be moving in and out of some sort of facility. So let me go ahead and I want to stop this. So the next thing I thought I'd set up is another reader in our environment, just for a different type of setup. So this one's doing the check-in, check-out options, and I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'll let these come back into the stock room. I'm going to go ahead and set up some workstations out in our workspace where we're going to track product for how long they're at an area. So let's put these things away with an additional reader. So I'm going to add a new reader to my environment. Let me add, I'll do 3 antennas. Let's do workstation 1, do workstation 2, 3. So I want to keep track of how long these products are staying at each workstation. So maybe something's being built between these 3 locations. Workstation 3. Okay, so here's workstation. Let's actually reverse these because maybe I'll do the animation. So I have workstation 1, 2, and 3 in this direction. These products, maybe they get assembled. They come out of they get checked out. They come down here. They go from 1, 2 to 3. Maybe they'll go back in. So we'll put these stations here. We need to add. I'll wire up 3 antennas. And I'm going to leave these as circles because maybe we installed them over the top of the workstation. Let me put this over here because it's port 1 on the rear. This is port 2, and then this will be port 3. So now really all I want to do is I want these things to come out. They're going to get assembled here at this location for some length of time. And I want to get tag events for when the product came to a workstation, when it left the workstation, when it came to this workstation, and so on. I'm going to configure each one of those. So for the animation, let me go ahead and add my areas here. And I will set a halt duration here for this as well. So let me put 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. It's just taking 2 seconds to assemble whatever at each location. And then just to get them out of the way, I'll bring them over here. So these things will flow through here and get tracked at each station. They'll be checked in and out of this area here and keep track of how long they're at each one of these. One other thing I did actually I'll put here as well is, you know what, I want to be notified when these things are coming out of this room. So I'm going to put a GPO on this, on the outside of the doorway. I'm going to have this light up when tags are read. So I know when things are coming in and out of this room by this light stack here that's wired to our reader. Okay, so there I have the new reader, reader 2, with 3 antennas at each workstation. So let's go ahead and configure this one. It's all wired up. The guy's wired up for me. And now I'm going to go ahead and configure it in ClearStream. So let me delete my data just to start fresh and come over to the configure. Now, I only have one reader. I'm going to call this one the check-in out process. Whoops. I could type check-in out process. And I'm going to now go ahead and configure another reader. So I'm going to bring up my reader device configuration. I'm going to add a second simulated reader that I want to call workstation reader. This one will have 3 antennas wired to it. So I'm going to go ahead and add those 3 antennas. Port 1 was wired at workstation 1. Workstation 2 was antenna 2. And workstation 3 was antenna port 3. I've got 1, 2, and 3. Now for the tag settings here, I'm not doing check-in, check-out. I want to track how long the items are at each one of these workstations. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put a 2-second timeout on these. And I want to report the tag no longer visible. Oops. And I'm going to report the event as at workstation. And left workstation. Or let's do assembly complete. And let's do assembly started. That might make more sense. Assembly. All right. So I'm changing my tag settings here a little bit. That I don't have any custom events like the other one, but I have it as report visible. Report visible is going to report to my database that the assembly started. It's going to report tag no longer visible. So when it leaves this workstation, I'm also going to get a timestamp of when it left of assembly complete. I also don't report it again only till after not visible. I only want to report it once while it's sitting at this workstation. So that's what these 3 events will allow me to do here. These control how much data gets sent to my destination. I just want to know when it shows up at the workstation and then when it leaves that workstation as 2 events in our database. So that's all I'm going to configure here. Again, I have my antenna settings. My reader's scanning continuously. I never turn them off. And actually, I wanted to hook up my GPO on the other reader. So I'm going to go back to Stockroom A reader and click on the General Purpose Output tab and just add a tag read alert type to true, and I'll turn it on for like, I don't know, 2 seconds as well. So I've wired up my GPO so that every tag read on Stockroom A reader will cause that light to come on. So you'll see the light in the workspace when tags are being read. So that's all I want to configure for this. I'm going to come back over and now I'm going to start all my readers in this case rather than just the one. So it's going to go ahead and power on both the Stockroom A reader as well as, didn't configure my second process. Let me go back. Let me stop that reader. So I only had the one reader pointed to a destination. So I actually have to point the other one as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit add to this. And we're going to call this the workstation tracking. In this case, my reader is going to be the workstation reader. And my destination, I'm going to go to the same database. I could go to a completely different database. I could go to a completely different place. It could be goes to a web service in this case or something like that. For the demo today, I'm just going to go ahead and select the ClearStream RFID sample and the RFID tag list and then set my mappings. So now I have 2 processes here. Again, the first one is reporting anything that's read by Stockroom reader A to the RFID tag list table. And the workstation tracking is the workstation reader going to that same table. So I'm going to go ahead now and start this up, start all. This now should start each one of them in my environment. So you can see they both go to true there. I'll bring this over. Now everything's on. You can see both of these readers are powered on. Now, just to show you how this works before I maybe run this through the animation. I'm going to take this box here and skip around this one and come into workstation 1 and put the package right in workstation 1. So it's being assembled here. So you can see in the background, it sent one tag to the destination and it's not sending any more. Now by default, RFID can send a lot of data to an endpoint, even for the same tag. So by me turning on some of those events, those checkboxes for report again only after not visible, I'm controlling how much data gets sent to that endpoint. And again, I only wanted when it first shows up to the workstation and then when it goes away. So if I go over to my data here, I have that tag is at workstation 1 and assembly was started at 11:38 a.m. So now if I go to that environment and pull it away, let me go to this so you can see the count go up. If I pull this outside of it now it's left to that workstation and it's no longer there. So after my timeout, ClearStream reports that tag's no longer visible. And if I go to the data here, I can see that assembly was started at workstation 1 at 11:38, and then assembly was complete at 11:39. So I'm keeping track of how often or how long that tag was sitting and being worked on at that location. So that's how that's set up. So let's go ahead and maybe turn this animation on. I'll delete all my data. And this might get a little tricky because there's going to be a lot of stuff flowing through these 3 workstations, but you'll see the activity going as the items are going in and out of the read zones. So if I come back here, I'll hit play on my environment. So here they all come. One of them might have skipped past my read zone there. So now they're going through. Now you can see the workstation. Look, they're all being reported at the workstation. They're going to go to the next one and be reported at the next workstation. Here they're going to the next workstation. Now these are pretty close, and they're not very long. They're not there that long. But you can see this data being tracked through the environment. And if I were to then go into my data, you can see the data that's coming over. If I try to sort this by ID, I guess. 2 items were checked out. I had one that missed the animation there, but then they all went to workstation 1. They all went to workstation 2. They all left workstation 1. Now there's overlap here because I have a 2-second timeout, but they are now no longer at workstation 1. Then they went from 2 to 3. They're being reported no longer at 2, and then now they're being reported no longer at 3, and then they're all being checked in. If I refresh this, you'll see another round or a couple rounds where they're all going out. They're all at workstation 1, all at workstation 2, followed by all at 3, as well as the events that the assembly were completed in here. I probably would want to go back and reduce some of the timeouts just to make sure my database records are coming in as at workstation 1, followed immediately by the no longer at workstation 1. I have this moving pretty quickly and they're close together. But I think you can see the idea there. It's recording that the assembly was started at workstation 1 at 11:40, and then assembly was complete at workstation 1 at 11:40, unfortunately, because they're going so quick. But you're getting all of that data as the items are moving throughout the facility. So you can see I have more check-in, more check-out. Again, I can refresh this data, and I'm getting all of this historical data of how these products are moving throughout my facility. And there, actually, you can see the GPO just came on there when it came out. But you can see it's tracking all of this as this goes throughout the facility from workstation 1, 2, 3, and then it goes back in. And I'll just, in case you missed it, let me wait here for 1 second while this GPO is going to turn on. Once these things go through this read zone, there it goes to red. So you can see that turn on. So again, that could be a real light stack if you had this set up with actual equipment, and you can power this up for to show activity. Okay. So that's kind of it. Really what I wanted to show you today, just a kind of a broad overview of how you can use this to see how RFID might work in your environment. Again, this isn't perfect. Really like to stress the fact that this is really to kind of understand how ClearStream works. It's a great tool for learning some of the features of ClearStream. For instance, doing the check-in or check-out, doing the station tracking where we're tracking how long an item is at a location, things like that. Learning maybe some of the materials that you shouldn't have a paper label affixed to. those sorts of things, and really learning the product, learning how to set it up for what you're trying to do. But secondly, it allows you to kind of pick and choose where you might want to track items in your facility before you wire up the equipment or before you start doing testing of actual equipment. And if you don't have any equipment, it's of course a good way to kind of set it up and see how it might work until you get some equipment to test with. But always you would want to test with actual equipment, actual product, and in your actual environment after doing this. One thing that is very tricky to do is check in, check out with actual equipment because you have to position these antennas in such a way that they don't have overlap. You don't want this going on in a check-in, check-out. You don't want them too far apart, things like that. But you might get reflections in a real environment. So this antenna here, which is emitting RF to read those tags, might bounce off this wall and then come over here. So those sorts of things you definitely need to kind of consider and test in with actual equipment after getting an idea of how it might work in your environment with this virtual site survey tool. So I think that's everything I wanted to show you today. With that, let me jump back over to the PowerPoint for our question and answer period. So if anyone has any questions, please send them over in the question panel. First question here, could we be emailed this presentation that you're giving right now? We always record these webinars and then we post them up on our YouTube channels. And going back to the point about the social media, it will be sent out there as well. So if you sign up for our social media, you'll see these webinars and you can review them once they get posted to our site. That usually just takes a day or two to get uploaded to YouTube. We did one again last week, and if you're on social media, you should have been notified of that for BLE zoning, which is a pretty cool demo as well, to see tracking Bluetooth beacons throughout a facility. And a question with that, along those lines, the point that I just mentioned there, does this virtual site survey tool allow you to view BLE beacon data and set up gateways within your environment? Unfortunately, no. The virtual site survey only does right now RFID simulation. Bluetooth beacons could be similar in the way that you're kind of demonstrating how it might work, especially with that station tracking that I set up. But it doesn't actually allow you to place like Bluetooth gateways throughout the facility or the Bluetooth beacons in your environment. So it's just the RFID side. Question here, how sensitive are solutions like this if a bunch of products pass through the door in both directions at the same time? So that's a great question, and more of a point of testing this in a real environment. If I just bring this floor plan up again so you can see, the directions don't matter. The equipment can actually scan quite a bit of tags as they go through here, on the order of hundreds, thousands of tags at a time, or in a very short window. So the direction doesn't matter because it's actually scanning on one antenna followed by another, and it's not relying on things like a motion sensor or anything like that, where the motion can be tripped by both directions. It's really that this specific tag has went through this side first, then this side, or in the reverse. Now, again, directionality is tricky. One thing you'd probably want to do in a lot of directionality type setups is at least have multiple antennas on either side, because the human body blocks RF almost completely. So if you're trying to track something that someone is carrying, if they hold the equipment on one side of their body, it can be missed by one antenna. So you'd almost in all cases want to add additional antennas and basically have these two antennas, say on the outside, both named out, and they'll both then still record their directionality, but you're more likely to get a hit of that tag on both sides of the portal. So another reason for testing, you want to make sure that you have good coverage on both sides, something that you're not going to see in this virtual environment. There's no people in this environment to block the tag being scanned. Here's a question. How would you handle multiple workstations that are right next to each other like desks? So probably in a similar setup here. Now, RFID readers and your tags can actually get read at quite a long distance. If you have an open environment with a nice big tag, you can get 30, 40 feet or more of a read range. So what you want to do if they're very close to each other is actually power the antennas down. I had these at full power here, and it doesn't really matter in the virtual environment because it has a pretty strict read zone where the circle is. If you reduce the power, they'll actually shrink up the circle. But with using actual equipment, you can power the antenna way down, and when you get it to a very low power level with real equipment, it can get down to almost a contact level scan where the RFID tag actually has to touch the antenna. So if you want it on a desk, you just want to power it down and then just maybe get a foot of read range. So once it's being placed on the desk, it would be read to pick up that tag. So it's a very good question. Full power in that environment is probably not going to be great because you might get workstation 1 might read workstation 2's tags. So you just want to reduce the power on those antennas to something nice and low. And again, you can tweak it. Just start lowest and go up from there. Start lowest means the piece of paper or whatever you're tracking on desk has to, physically touch it. But then maybe you want to get a little bit higher. You want to get a couple inches off the tabletop or that desktop. So you might power it up just a little bit. A follow-up question to that: how sensitive are the readers when the workstations are too close? Again, just follows up with that. You just want to reduce the read zone. And if you have the antenna powers all the way at the minimum for most readers, it's a contact type scan where you have to place the label on top of the antenna, directly on top to scan it. So you can get it very short read ranges and you won't interfere with two locations that are very close. Question on, are there any guides on best practices for installation and testing? I might have to follow up with you on what we have on our website. We might have some articles like that on our knowledge base, or we might have some material that we might set out. With RFID, it's very, very, very dependent on your environment. If you've researched it at all in the past, you've probably heard that plenty of times. It's what type of material are you trying to track? Then you have to pick the correct label. And if you don't have the correct label with the correct equipment type, you're not going to get a good result or good read performance in your environment. So you really have to start there. Know exactly what you're tagging. Test different types of tags. We actually offer sample tags that we can send out. Test different types of tags with the equipment. Get the performance you need out of the type of tag, and then test from there, because the environment does affect it that much. Another follow-up question about the scanning these RFID tags with the desk. How do you mount the readers when you want to use it over a desk? If you're trying to track documents or something on a desk, sometimes you can mount the antenna underneath it because generally it'll read through that material as long as it's not metal. If it's a metal desk, you can't do that. But if it's something else, wood, plastic, some type of material that's other than metal, you can mount that antenna right on the bottom of the desk. And then when you put stuff on top, it'll actually read through that. And in that case, the antenna just has a wire that goes to it to the reader. So you can put the reader wherever you'd like. That makes sense. It could be lower on the desk. It could be off the desk if you want to wire up a couple different antennas to different desks, things like that. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions here. Please send them over if you still have them. I'll bring up our contact information in the meantime. So here is our contact information. If you have any questions, you can still send them over if you'd like. But if you have any questions after the webinar today, please reach out to us. We'd be glad to help. Also like to mention that we have something called open office hours. It's every Tuesday at 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time, and Thursday 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern time. And that's a great place to get all of your questions answered as well. You can log into that on a GoToWebinar and ask real questions to our techs here. Anything that you'd like, and we could go ahead and answer it. So it's a good place also to get some like your questions about best practices. It might be a good place to say, hey, this is my environment, this is what I'm trying to track, and you can kind of lay it out for the tech on the call, and they could give you best practices for that. This question here about how practical is the use of RFID tags to specific rack locations inside of a warehouse? I mean, this depends on the type of read range you get with those racks, I guess, and how localized you'd like the read zones to be. The antennas can get quite a long read range, which could be sometimes a blessing and a curse based on what you're trying to track. If you power up the antennas very high, you might not get very specific read locations in your, based on your environment. You might read through a couple shelves, a couple racks, and then you're not getting maybe that location data that you're looking for in that environment. So you want to kind of see what level of accuracy you'd like as far as location. Look at the tags you might need for your environment, the cost of the tags, the type of equipment you're tagging, to kind of get an idea of what that coverage is going to look like. How many readers are you going to need in your environment? The readers only have a certain number of ports for antennas. And if you have, a small location that might need 1,000 antennas because you want very granular detail of where things are, you're going to have a lot of equipment there tracking that, a lot of readers and a lot of antennas, as well as a lot of install for that. So you kind of have to lay the whole thing out to get an idea of, the practicality of what you're looking to track. Follow up to that, I think, or along those lines, best practices to track IT assets, modems, PCs, and desktops. So this is a great question. IT assets can vary quite a bit in their materials and batteries in them and all sorts of things. So you generally want to look for some type of all-purpose tag that has a decent size to it. So it's got to be an on-metal tag, or sometimes they call them universal tags, where they can be mounted to plastic items, metal items, things like that. Or you want to break down some types you want to use 2 different types of tags. All of my iMacs that I'm tracking in my environment, they all have metal casings. You want to put an on-metal tag on that. That's a reasonable size. But then I'm also tracking these, plastic cased Lenovo or Dell laptops. I can get a slightly different tag for those, and just know that I'm affixing the correct tag to the correct type. But definitely for IT assets, you want sort of a universal tag, because there's just the different materials. Like an iPad, if you try to put a tag on the back of an iPad, it's got a huge battery in it, which can mess with the signal, as well as it's metal on the back generally. So you want an on-metal tag, but you want something of reasonable size so you get decent read range. So I mean, that's the best I could really say, just not knowing your environment completely, is that you want to look for either multiple types of tags for the different types of equipment you're using, or some type of universal tag of reasonable size. If you get really small, a lot of people like small tags because you can't find them, or they're less intrusive on the equipment. You won't get great read range because they're just so tiny. You want it a little bit bigger. A question here on what is the cost range for the types of readers. This can vary quite a bit too. You might want to reach out to us after the call to go over your use case. They vary. There's short range readers that might be much less expensive than the longest read range readers. So you probably want to reach out to us after the webinar today to get an idea of what reader you're looking for, and then the general cost of it. Great question here for this webinar. Would a visit at the site be necessary for the site survey, or can it be done remotely? I don't think this site survey tool would ever take place of doing a true site survey at the location. It might get it's really good for showing where you want to probably pick and choose where your antennas are going, but for testing purposes, for looking around at that location, is there a lot of metal there? Is there a lot of stuff that might affect the read ranges? You could only get from being on location. It's also just a great tool for learning how you might set it up at that location. So prior to going to the site survey, the on-site survey, you could set it up similarly in the virtual site survey, and then validate your testing there once you're at location with the equipment installed in that somewhat orientation to match what you've created in this tool. I don't think it would ever replace an actual on-site virtual site survey, or I keep saying for site survey, but it's for learning how you might set it up, and kind of visualizing the flow of what you want to capture in that environment. And here is there a cost range for the types of tags. This varies even more wildly than the RFID readers. Tags come in all sorts of sizes, and there's small tags, large tags, paper tags. So you'd have, I would say, reach out to us again with what type of things you're looking to track, and we can give you kind of a range of different tags and how much they might cost. Here's a question. I've got a problem with where users hold hands over the tags area on IT assets. Is there any way to get around this? This is a good question, and unfortunately, there's no great answer to it. The human body blocks the RF almost entirely. If you take an RFID tag and put it between your two hands and walk right past an antenna, it'll miss it. So you can hide it from that read. So really, you want to try to get enough angle from the different antennas as you can. Come from the the left side, the right side, and the top. Maybe orientate the antennas in a little bit of an angle so that kind of envisioning the human body walking by, how might I be able to hit that tag, even if it's covered up a little bit? I want to hit it at some point. If it's completely covered, there's really nothing you can do because it just cannot physically read the tag with fixed UHF RFID. There's some things you can do though on the process side. You could maybe do something like the GPO where you could have a user, if somebody walks through a portal and no tag is scanned, you could have a light come on. So then if there's a visual indicator or a buzzer or something that, hey, you just walked through this portal, nothing was scanned, double check what you have, make sure it is scanned. So it's process type stuff you can do just to ensure that the user, is more likely to even want that tag being scanned as they're walking through the facility. I've known some locations that'll do something like that where the buzzer sounds, it might make an entry in the database saying, hey, this person or a person walked through, and then they have to do something to follow up to get that to say turn off or validate that they didn't take anything. Even with like a little kiosk or something at the location to validate what you're doing with the RFID. So more process level things, but the RFID tags won't be scanned through a human body. So if they're completely covering it up, unfortunately, there really isn't any way to scan that tag. The best you can do is try to get good coverage over the portal or the read zone so that you're coming at where you're looking to scan these tags from different angles to get more likelihood of a scan on that tag. Okay, no other questions. Well, again, I appreciate everyone joining us and taking some time out of the day to hop on a ClearStream RFID Getting Started With webinar. I hope this is helpful for you guys. I do always encourage everyone after the webinars to go to clearstreamrfid.com and download the free trial. And you can set everything up that you saw here today to kind of test it and use it as with a free trial. So I encourage you to check that out. And if you do that, and if you have any questions, please reach out to us with the contact information that you see on the screen here. So with that, again, thank you all, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. So keep an eye out for that one. All right, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.